Derek Williams had been the operations director at Pinnacle Solutions for 3 years, and in that time, he developed a reputation for being unreasonably demanding about punctuality. If you're 30 seconds late from lunch, Derek will notice. If you take a bathroom break that lasts more than 5 minutes, Derek will ask where you've been. What made this particularly grating was Derek's own habit of disappearing for what he called client lunches that stretched from 12:30 until nearly 3 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday. When questioned about these extended absences, Derek would flash his practiced smile and mention important business relationships that required nurturing. I'm Elena Vasquez, Senior Project Coordinator, and I've been watching Derek's pattern for months now. 22 years in corporate environments teach you to notice inconsistencies, especially when they come from people who demand perfection from everyone else. The first red flag came when I noticed Derek's client lunches always happened on days when his wife Sarah posted on social media about working late at her law firm. Sarah Williams was a partner at Morrison & Associates, and her schedule was publicly visible on the firm's website for client meetings. The second red flag was Derek's choice of restaurants. The Meridian Hotel restaurant isn't exactly known for business lunches. It's known for discreet afternoon encounters in rooms rented by the hour upstairs. But what really caught my attention was the day I saw Derek's credit card statement accidentally included in a budget report he'd asked me to review. 2 charges at the Meridian on the same day, 3 hours apart. One for lunch, one for a hotel room. I've been in this business long enough to know that people who abuse their power in one area usually abuse it in others. And Derek had been pushing boundaries for months. Just last week, Derek had fired Jennifer from accounting for being 10 minutes late 3 times in a month. The week before that, he'd written up David from IT for taking what he called excessive personal calls, which turned out to be David checking on his elderly mother in hospice care. But Derek's most recent target was Ashley, our newest marketing associate. Ashley was brilliant, hardworking, and unfortunately very attractive. Derek had been finding excuses to call her into his office for performance reviews that seemed to focus more on her appearance than her actual work. Yesterday, Ashley came to me in tears because Derek had told her that her professional image needed work and suggested she join him for lunch to discuss her career development. When she politely declined, he hinted that her probationary period might not go well. That's when I decided Derek's pattern of behavior needed to be addressed. But I wasn't going to go through HR like most people would. Brenda in HR was Derek's golf buddy's wife, and complaints about Derek had a way of disappearing or getting turned around on the complainants. Instead, I remembered something from my previous job at Hartwell Industries. I'd worked directly under the chief financial officer there, Catherine Morrison. Yes, the same Morrison from Morrison & Associates. Sarah Williams's boss and senior partner. Catherine and I had maintained a professional relationship over the years. We occasionally exchanged industry insights, and she'd been a reference for my position at Pinnacle. More importantly, Catherine had very strong opinions about workplace integrity and the sanctity of marriage, having gone through a messy divorce herself when she discovered her ex-husband's affairs. The beautiful thing about corporate networks is that they're smaller than people think. And sometimes the person you need to reach is just 2 phone calls away. I spent my lunch hour on Tuesday doing reconnaissance. The Meridian Hotel was a 15-minute drive from our office, and sure enough, Derek's BMW was in their parking lot at 1:15. I didn't need to see more than that. But I did see more. As I was leaving, I noticed him in the lobby with Rebecca Walsh from Synergy Dynamics, one of our supposed competitors. Rebecca was married too, and she was definitely not there for a business meeting, based on how she was dressed and how close she was standing to Derek. This was perfect. Not only was Derek cheating on his wife, but he was potentially sharing confidential information with a competitor. Corporate espionage concerns would make this a much more serious matter. Wednesday morning, I made my first phone call to Catherine Morrison. "Elena, how wonderful to hear from you," Catherine said in her crisp professional tone. "How are things at Pinnacle Solutions?" "They're interesting, Catherine. I'm actually calling because I've stumbled across a situation that involves one of your partners, and I thought you should be aware of it before it potentially becomes a larger issue." "I'm listening." "It concerns Sarah Williams and her husband Derek, who works here at Pinnacle. I have reason to believe Derek is engaging in behavior that could compromise both companies professionally and personally." There was a pause. Catherine Morrison doesn't like pauses in conversation, which means she was taking this very seriously. What kind of behavior are we talking about, Elena? The kind that involves afternoon meetings at the Meridian Hotel with competitors, combined with expense account fraud and abuse of power toward female employees. I have documentation. I see. Sarah is in court today, but she'll be back tomorrow morning. Can you send me what you have? I think this needs to be addressed immediately. Perfect. Catherine understood the implications without me having to spell them out. I spent Wednesday evening preparing a detailed report. Derek's credit card statements showing the hotel charges. His calendar showing the blocked-out time for fake client meetings. Screenshots of Sarah's social media posts showing her work schedule. Photos of his car at the Meridian. But the real masterpiece was the employment law angle. I documented every instance of Derek's inappropriate behavior toward female employees, his discriminatory firing practices, and his abuse of company resources. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about creating a hostile work environment and potential sexual harassment. Thursday morning, I sent everything to Catherine with a note. I believe Sarah deserves to know about this situation before it potentially affects her career or reputation. I also think Pinnacle's board should be aware of the liability issues Derek's behavior is creating. Catherine's response came within 2 hours. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Sarah and I will be meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation. I've also taken the liberty of contacting James Hartwell, who I believe is on Pinnacle's board of directors. This will be handled appropriately. James Hartwell. I'd forgotten he joined Pinnacle's board after selling Hartwell Industries. This was getting better by the minute. At exactly 12:15 on Thursday, I watched Derek straighten his tie and head toward the elevator, just like he had every Tuesday and Thursday for months. He was practically whistling. He had no idea that at that exact moment, Sarah Williams was sitting in Catherine Morrison's office, looking at photographs of her husband's BMW in the Meridian Hotel parking lot. At 1:30, while Derek was presumably ordering wine for his afternoon tryst, Sarah Williams was calling James Hartwell to schedule an emergency board meeting regarding potential legal liabilities created by Pinnacle's operations director. At 2:15, as Derek was probably heading upstairs to his hotel room, James Hartwell was conference calling Pinnacle's CEO and chief legal counsel to discuss immediate personnel actions needed to prevent potential lawsuits. At 3 o'clock, when Derek typically returned from his client lunches, there was a message waiting for him to report immediately to the CEO's office. I had a perfect view of the executive conference room from my desk, and I watched through the glass walls as Derek walked in, still adjusting his shirt collar, completely oblivious to what was waiting for him. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. I watched Derek's expression change from confident to confused to horrified as he realized what was happening. When he tried to speak, the CEO held up a hand and slid a document across the table. Termination for cause. Immediate forfeiture of all benefits. Potential legal action for misuse of company resources and creation of hostile work environment. But the real kicker came when James Hartwell joined the meeting via video conference. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw Derek go completely pale when he realized who was on the screen. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply letting people face the natural consequences of their own choices. As Derek stumbled out of the conference room, clutching his termination papers, he looked directly at me through the glass. For just a moment, his eyes narrowed, and I could see him trying to figure out how this had happened. I gave him the same practice smile he'd been giving everyone for months and turned back to my computer screen. The beautiful thing about playing the long game is that when you finally make your move, it's already too late for your opponent to do anything about it. Derek stood there for almost a full minute, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something. But what could he say? That he'd been caught cheating on his wife with a competitor while abusing his corporate expense account and sexually harassing employees? I heard his phone buzz with what I assumed was a text message, probably from Rebecca wondering where he was. Or maybe from Sarah's divorce attorney. Either way, Derek's afternoon plans had just taken a very different turn.